welcome everyone to Nerdy Nekama. Today we're going to continue with Trapped in the Past. This is part 3, so yeah, if you have not watched the first two, I'd advise to do that, for context. Now, let's go. I hope you enjoy. If you do, don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's go! Oikawa huddled up to Kageyama's side, careful not to move him. The youngest head never stopped shaking and his lips proceeded to lose color. The elder was desperate to somehow help him, but didn't know what more to do aside from applying pressure to the wound and trying his best to warm him. It all seemed futile, as he himself had long since started freezing in the cool basement, now with his arms exposed to the air. The only silver lining was the slowly subsiding flow of blood, something that, considering Kageyama was still conscious, couldn't be because he had none left to bleed. Oikawa knew that the object was holding in most of the vital liquid, and that the makeshift pressure bandage seemed to help limit it further, but it wouldn't hold up for long. Kageyama was barely holding on to consciousness, and only Oikawa's insistent comments when he threatened to drift off grounded him. The room had long fallen silent. The raven wasn't lucid enough anymore to engage in conversation, and although Oikawa probably should keep on talking to him, he couldn't. It felt as though a thin string had wrapped around his throat and tightened steadily as time passed. The very same panic that had him spilling secrets he vowed to never reveal out of shame before was now stealing his voice, as all he could think about how he failed him, them, all of them, once more. It was his stubbornness, an unwillingness to confront himself that got them trapped down here. His arrogance that made him not check in on Kageyama earlier. He was breathing heavily when, over the rushing of his own blood in his ears, a noise broke through. It was a scraping sound, then a dull echo, and voices. Where the hell could that idiot have run off to? And why isn't he answering his phone? Iwa. The whisper passed barely audible under his breath, and suddenly he was in motion. He desperately climbed the stairs, falling twice as his eyes zeroed in on the door. He needed to reach them before they left again. Iwa! Hajime! He screamed. His voice broke, but he screamed. With a loud thud, he collided against the door, not bothering to slow down. A sharp pain rushed to his shoulder, but he couldn't care less. He began pounding against the hard barrier in hopes of being noticed. It drowned out Iwazumi's response at first, but at the upteenth time, he noticed and stilled. Toru, how did you get in there? He sobbed with relief, incapable of giving a legible answer. Daichi, quick, help me with this. Hold on, Toru, okay? We're going to get you out of there. His voice was calm, forcibly so, but calm nonetheless. He must have noticed Oikawa's distress. Ambulance, please, we need an ambulance, quick. What? The panic in Iwazumi's voice increased, and Oikawa clenched his jaw as the scraping noise intensified. Daichi! Here, wait, I'll tell Ko to call the medics, and then help me. He sounded strained. Oikawa listened closely, but soon the noises from the blockage being removed was all he could hear. He knew the moment Daichi came to assist them, as they seemed to move quicker. Indefinitely relieved, and yet more stressed than he had ever felt before, he leaned against the door as he waited. When it finally swung open, he fell. His hands touched the ground, yet it wasn't enough to steady himself. He was too exhausted, too drained from the hours spent in panic and blind worry. He had never seen this much blood before in his life. Toru! Daichi's voice was alarmed and growing in panic as he rushed towards him. He reached out to him almost frantically and pulled him up. For a moment, Oikawa didn't understand why his eyes were blown wide in horror. It slowly dawned on him what an image he must make for. Covered in blood, his hands and clothes soaked in the dreadful liquid. That was when he remembered Tobio, and suddenly none of them could move fast enough. He fought himself up with clumsy, uncoordinated motions, so unlike anything he had ever presented on the court, only to fall back into Daichi's arms again. "Quick, where are you hurt? What? No." His voice had given out on him, and he had to force it to carry any weight at all. Only Daichi's tight grasp on his middle and arm kept him from stumbling down the stairs once more. All that he could think of was that he had abandoned him again, in much more critical condition. "It's not me. Hajime!" He cried out to the other as Daichi refused to let go of him, even though he knew, even if he did, he didn't have the strength anymore to do what had to be done. "It's Tobio. Please. Hajime, help him." It was a whisper, but the other understood immediately and rushed past them while Oikawa collapsed back into Daichi's arms. Just then Suga joined them and paled at the sight. "Toru! Don't worry, the medics are on their way, He weakly shook his head and mumbled, "Not for me," under his breath, but he might as well have said nothing. Before he could clarify, Suga's eyes were drawn to something to the right. He clasped his hands over his mouth and tears sprung from his eyes as a choked cry escaped his throat. When Oikawa turned slowly, despite everything in him screaming not to do it, he knew it had pushed him past what he could endure for a day. He still stubbornly forced his head to move, and once more the world seemed to fade in and out of focus as he recognized Iwaizumi climbing the stairs and unconscious Kageyama in his arms. The pipe was still sticking out from his abdomen, and Iwa did his utmost not to move it. The jacket around his middle had soaked up enough blood to drip a few of the red drops to the floor. Kageyama's face was slack, almost unbothered in his unconscious state, almost like he was sleeping. If only he had been sleeping. He was still so pale. Oikawa couldn't help but see the weak little kid, excited and yet hurting, he was before in his place. He was equally as vulnerable now, equally as innocent in how it had come to this. "Tobio!" Yamaguchi's scream for his partner was the last thing he heard before passing out from exhaustion. He briefly noted that he had never heard or seen such an emotion from the usually more timid and in recent years balanced student, but right now his scream was gut-wrenching. Hinata clung to Tsukishima's arm, determined to see if they had found their boyfriend rather than staying put. He wouldn't just do nothing because he should rest his ankle. He could do that when they got home. A few minutes ago, Suga had rushed back into the hall, now filled with less and less people as the aftershocks had passed and it was deemed safe to leave. He had alerted the paramedics and run off again. From what he had gathered from afar, they had found Oikawa. Kageyama wasn't mentioned, but since he wanted to talk to the older setter, Hinata clung to his hope to find him there with him. Yamaguchi had agreed to check, but when he didn't return immediately, Hinata got up despite Tsukishima's protest. This was the compromise they reached as the smaller refused to budge. All his overthinking could not have prepared him for the sight unfolding in front of them around the corner. The first thing he heard were Yamaguchi's cries, and immediately his stomach dropped and his heart clenched with the need to comfort him, a task Suga had already taken to. Then his eyes wandered in search for the reason, and he froze. Paramedics had swarmed a person laying on the ground between them, with dark hair and clothes drenched in red, unrecognizable to how they were before. Kageyama. Without thinking, he stumbled forward, escaping Tsukishima's grip, who himself was stunned in shock and horror. He called after him, but Hinata ignored him. He ignored everyone until he somehow managed to get close enough to get a grip on Kageyama's hand. It was ice cold. Someone pulled him back. Multiple hands were grabbing onto him, losing the grasp he had on his partner. The words didn't reach him. He felt like he had lost the ground under his feet until Iwaizumi placed him in Tsukishima's arms once more. He clung to the blonde like a lifeline. Tadashi called. Kageyama stable and already awake again. The doctor said he got lucky, nothing vital was damaged, and Toto's bandage prevented neurological damage to the blood loss. He turned to Oikawa, who sat on their bed like a statue. You saved him. Oikawa didn't feel like he saved him. No, he felt like it was his fault. And really, what other way was there to look at this? Not just had he been the reason Kageyama had been in the position to be pierced by the pipe in the first place, his cold and downright cruel demeanor towards him had kept the younger from seeking out his help sooner. Suga spoke of the damages as though they were mild, but truly, what more could have been prevented if he had just acted sooner? He remembered how cold Toby had been, how pale. The blood loss hadn't been enough to cause neurological damages, but it certainly was enough to make him look like a corpse in the end. Lifeless. Toru? He half expected Iwaizumi's voice to be harsh after the stress and with his refusal to cooperate, but it was gentle. He didn't want to look up from the spot he had fixated on the ground, but did so automatically as the other reached out to him. In the dark green eyes lay a knowing look. It was branded with all the knowledge of his past with the younger sitter, with understanding, something Daichi and Suga couldn't possibly follow. Sometimes he still wondered how they could ever love him, knowing only Tobio's perspective of the whole story. However, right now it were Iwa's eyes that held him captive as he took his hand, and despite having witnessed and prevented his past behavior to Kageyama, they held nothing but compassion. It is not your fault. Oikawa opened his mouth without truly knowing what it was he tried to accomplish. Perhaps protest because the guilt weighed so heavy on him that he couldn't understand how they didn't see it. It didn't matter though. Whatever words his mind had prepared before he could fully conceptualize them never left his throat. He felt momentarily mute until a sob wrenched itself from his chest. It was as if Iwaizumi's words broke free the tears that had built behind a wall of disconnect. With them came the exhaustion, and his body collapsed against the trainer. After his first breakdown at the scene, as the paramedics took Kageyama away, he felt oddly distant. His body moved automatically, guided by his partners, and he answered their questions and that of the medics as to whether he was injured as well, with short nods or shaking his head. He barely said a word. Or maybe he did. He couldn't quite remember. It was hard enough to decipher all those noises around him, as though he had suddenly been placed in the water, not even trying to struggle and come up for air. Dissociation was the word one of them threw around as Daichi, still holding him upright, worriedly asked what was wrong with him. Aiko had found himself incapable to answer, but they did it for him. Something about the trauma of seeing someone so fatally injured, the blood that was still sticking to his clothes slowly drying. They brought him home in the hopes he would recover in a familiar environment. Iwaizumi, covered in blood himself since he had carried Kageyama from the basement, took a shower with him, and Oikawa continued to mechanically follow his instructions. Now he sobbed against his chest, and as he caught a glimpse of Daichi to the right, he could see the sheer pain flash over his face at his distress, but also relief. This, him crying over something that ended up okay, Kageyama would heal, was manageable, or at least not as scary anymore as his unresponsiveness. Thank you all so much for watching to the end. It really means a lot to me. This series was a lot of fun to write, though I'm not quite satisfied with the ending. Tell me what other parts or perspectives you want me to do, because I feel like I need to add something to this and I can't put my finger on what. So yeah, tell me under the pinned comment what your favorite quote and or moment of this video was, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you don't want to miss out on more of my content. It would mean the world to me, just as much as my nerdy Nekos who seriously support the channel so much. Thank you so much for NashTube, Samuel Link Simp, and Dreamer Girl, and Yummy who just joined. Please tell me and pronounced your names correctly. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. It means the world to me. Here are my other social media. Check them out if you like. And don't forget to check out the Discord as well, the link is in the channel description. And here are more videos, more content. Check it out if you like, and I hope you have a wonderful and amazing day. Bye everyone!
Today's gonna be a good day. Wake up. Today's gonna be a good day. Wake up. Today's gonna be a good day. Wake up. Today's gonna be a good day.